So thank you everyone for joining the session today on building on a Canadian digital data mosaic, creating a national student data exchange network. This is a project being led by the ARUCC Groningen and Student Mobility Steering Group, and my colleagues today will be sharing information about the project. Generally speaking, we're going to go through some introductions, then they're going to talk about creating the national solution, give you a project status update, the next steps, hopefully leave some time at the end for discussions. We only have until 3 p.m. today, which is, I believe that's 12 p.m. in the calculating in my mind all the different time zones. We have an hour, so we're going to try and leave a little bit at the end for questions. So without further ado, many of you know Charmaine and Ramesh. My name is Joanne Duclas, and I've been hired to help them with the project. I'm going to be mostly silent during this session and doing the chat moderating. Charmaine is the president of ARUCC and University Registrar at Ryerson, and she is the chair of the steering committee for the project. Ramesh is our incoming president, and he's assistant registrar and director at McGill. And he also is sitting on the steering committee, and they are my go-to people for many things. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over first to Charmaine.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And welcome, everyone. We are absolutely thrilled to be able to share information with you in this format. And with luck, everything will go well, and we'll be doing this more frequently. We have a lot of information about the project, not all of which we'll be able to cover today. We have a website that has a lot more detail and fleshes out some of the things that we're going to talk about. So I just want to, at the very outset, remind you that the ARUCC website has a link for all of the things that we're doing. And there's much more fulsome information, and certainly beyond today, we are more than happy to answer additional questions and to find out from you what your concerns are and what kinds of information you need. Joanne, are you moving us forward? Okay.
Yeah.
So we thought we would jump right into the project principles, because this is really what's sort of driving how we are shaping the project and looking at various solutions and opportunities. And number one, our goal with this is to improve student service, student support. It is at the focus of everything that we're doing. We want to preserve and support, of course, institutional and provincial or territorial diversity, autonomy and authority. What we're trying to do is not replace any of the existing systems and practices that may already be working well, but rather to create a means of enhancing that at a national level, so we can be more service-oriented for students who are increasingly moving their studies and their careers in a global framework. So we're looking to advance improvements and enhancements that support the student mobility and their ability to port data that is pertinent to their academic careers and what they need to display potentially for employers. Another principle is to, as I mentioned, build on and complement existing student application and data exchange hubs, and supporting the movement, I guess, of these credentials through our post-secondary networks. And we want to ensure that what we end up with is a national and evidence-based solution. So we're not looking to solve problems that don't exist. We've spent a fair amount of time reviewing what the problems are and what gaps we need to close. So that is a high-level overview of what the project principles involve. To move things forward, of course, ARUCC as an association, really spearheaded this initiative, but we can't move it forward at the national level and wouldn't want to without creating a national coalition of like-minded stakeholders. CUCCIO is on board with us in partnership, along with PESC, CanPESC, and PCAT. And these are together putting a lot of thought into what we're looking at, and really together we're able to tap into a lot of different layers of expertise in envisioning what might be appropriate going forward. So this is our national coalition, and we are so very grateful to have the participation from across the board. The steering committee includes myself, as well as Andrew Arida from the executive. He's past president of the ARUCC executive right now, and Ramesh, who you have already been introduced to and may already know. From PCCAT, the Pan-Canadian Consortium on Admissions and Transfer, we have Dr. Rob Fleming and Dr. Rob Adamowski from BCCAT, and we are absolutely thrilled to have them on board. And CUCIO, our Canadian University CIO folks, Brian Stewart from the University of Alberta, and Laurie McMullen, who represents CUCIO directly, are on board with us. And from CanPESC, many of you know Lisa Welsman, who's now at Conestoga College, and Kathy Van Soest from Education Planner BC. And newest to our steering committee, we have a regional representative, Jeff Adams from the University of Manitoba. And again, we are absolutely thrilled to have such a robust amount of expertise here on the steering committee. And now we'll share with you what this committee has been up to for the last little while. There we go. A very short list of the representation of the endorsements that we have received. We have been actively as a group and individuals among us reaching out and sharing information and answering questions and gaining feedback and receiving endorsements from a wide variety of stakeholders and like-minded organizations that are about student service and support. And we also have some of our individual institutions coming on board with a declaration of institutional support. And you will see Capilano University, Ryerson University, Conestoga College, and so on. And we do definitely invite you, if your institution would like to be a part of this in terms of the endorsement process, we'd be happy to speak with you about that as well. But this has been this represents a very active phase of the project. So the project involves, or has involved, a number of stages. I would say it really was inspired by something called the Groningen Declaration. Groningen, if you're not familiar with it, and I'm not saying it correctly, and our colleague from Holland always tries to get us to pronounce it more correctly, but Groningen is a place in Holland where the very first group, small number of individuals, met to say there has to be a better way to assist students and organizations with the exchange of data, given the digital world we live in and the technological capability we have now. ARUCC became a signatory of the Groningen Declaration, a movement really that has been growing exponentially now since 2015. It was after signing the Groningen Declaration as a signatory that the first task force was established, and the first task force conducted a national survey to, at the very outset, gauge interest in whether or not ARUCC members were interested in having us pursue a bit more research and to learn more about this and where we were positioned. There was robust interest in pursuing, finding out more about what this would be. So the period from June 2016 to really now, leading up to the ARUCC caucus meeting, we'll have our biennial meeting, has really involved creation of a new steering committee or continuation and some new membership. We hired a project consultant lead, which became incredibly important, and you've now met Joanne. This project represents hundreds and hundreds of hours of conference calls, meetings, and attention to detail and outreach. And without Joanne's help, I'd have to say we'd be a little lost. She's keeping us all organized and together. In this period, we brought on CUCIO and PCCAT and CanPESC as project partners. And we released a request for information worldwide and asked for we conducted consultations. As you've seen, we've been receiving endorsements, and we've been engaging in a variety of research initiatives to further understand what the landscape looks like, just from a general interest perspective and appetite perspective, as well as from a technological capacity perspective. In this period, we've also had some very robust conversations around potential governance models, because of course we will need to define, if we achieve this, how we're going to govern it, and what does that look like in a country where education is governed itself at the provincial level. So there's no sort of national entity that can tie us all together. We need to find a way to keep ourselves tied together through mutual interest and shared objectives. Of course, there is a financial piece to this, and we are looking at some funding options. Certainly there may be a piece of this that comes back to the institutions to assist with, but we do have our sights, I would say, on some opportunities for external funding for this kind of a project. So this is a very, very tight timeline that we're presenting here. So flash forward now to just a month from now, in June 2018, we will have a confirmed business case ready to share. We will, we hope, after June the 18th, with a new ARUCC executive in place, be moving forward to take that business case and formalize its aspects into an RFP for public release. And then we will actively, the plan is, move into the fundraising portion of the project. So there's some very big steps still to come. And it's really because of this point in the project where we're transitioning from thinking about things, researching and putting a lot of information together and sharing information, that we're moving to more tactical considerations and a very real desire to have institutional representatives that we can speak with, such as yourselves, on a more regular basis, to make sure that you have access to some of the background information and intelligence that we've been able to gather over the last couple of years. So here's another way of looking at our project history. Our little footprints moving along. In 2015, again, we signed the declaration, and then we moved very quickly over that space of time to where we are now in moving towards our next big step. Thanks, just waiting for all of these to flow up. The steering committee, as part of the ARUCC executive, did take this project and have been repeatedly discussing it with the membership of ARUCC. And we received a unanimous endorsement in 2016 to continue with the exploration and development of this national solution for a Canadian data exchange model. So we're doing this work on behalf of all of our members. And the mandate includes, of course, guiding the development of the Canadian data exchange model that will recognize that we are across the country at different levels in terms of capacity, technologically speaking, and that we need to be very responsive to the different stages that we are all at. We feel we're mandated to embed core benefits into the model so that it is very clear what we are trying to solve by moving forward with a national solution. We want to improve student service, improve student mobility through efficient data sharing, encourage national dialogue around student mobility and success, align with national and international goals of other Canadian post-secondary pathway organizations. And I would add as a sidebar that with all kinds of conversation these days around fraudulent documents and concerns about the legitimacy of documents, one of the core benefits is to help us help students by making sure that the credentials that they present can flow seamlessly and efficiently and in a trusted environment. With ARUCC leading, sorry Joanne, can you flip back for a moment? With ARUCC leading, we are looking to create this governance model, which would be some kind of a national steering committee yet to be determined that would provide project oversight. Some highlights, again, we hired the project consultant, and just to put into numbers what the work has involved, we've conducted about 500 plus consultations with registrarial and data exchange experts at the provincial, national, and international level. The Groningen Summit is an annual event now. I think it's into its 6th year, and that has proved to be an incredibly valuable opportunity to connect with this network of global partners that are doing incredible things and leading the path. And they are very interested in how we are approaching this in Canada, in the Canadian context, because of our structure in terms of the provincially mandated oversight for education generally. We did submit a formal research request, and that meant we were able to consult with 1,400 plus data exchange and student mobility experts, again, through the Groningen network, through the meetings, and through the distribution of the research request. Through direct consultation, we have engaged in one way or the other with over 100 organizations, vendors, solution providers, governments, government levels, and generally people with expertise around national and international data exchange. And we have learned an awful lot. We've had sample research. As I mentioned before, we're doing some research to help inform the project. We've done some website reviews. We've had various opportunities to connect with other folks who are doing presentations. We've had meetings and survey, and we're really trying to share the information as broadly as possible. And we are involved in some additional consultation through some more recently confirmed Ontario and BC projects. So as just sort of a snapshot, we've really been engaged in the spectrum from collaboration to engagement to consultation. And with key national associations around collaboration, with the data exchange network visible at the national level, what does that look like? We've been engaging with members and appropriate bodies about the project, and we've been consulting with a wide range of individuals and organizations, associations, and vendors. So where are we? We have some big deliverables now on the horizon. The business case or the business requirement document is in progress. It is already very, very fulsome and very detailed, and we are looking forward to sharing it in the coming months. So it is well on its way. We now need to confirm the business requirements and float them out among a few of you to see if we're tapping into the right things. Have we missed anything? Are there things that need to be emphasized in a different way? And then the plan, of course, as already mentioned, is after June the 18th and probably moving into the fall of 2018, our hope is to execute a full RFP and establish a framework for implementation. And this piece would happen after the conference. In moving towards the findings, I'm sharing this presentation with Ramesh, and I'll turn things over to you at this point.
Well, thank you, Charmaine. Just to further sort of contextualize things, all of those consultations that took place and the research that's been done to date, not that all of it is necessarily distilled in this or the next couple of slides, but the purpose here is really to give you a sense basically of where the strengths, on the next slide, where the gaps actually lie coast to coast. This is not necessarily meant to be completely exhaustive, but it certainly paints a very strong picture basically for where those relative jurisdictional strengths may lie and expertise that we could leverage. So you'll hear over the next few weeks for the other sessions, the webinars that we're hosting, you're going to hear from a variety of different experts on a variety of different topics. But here, basically, to set the stage, as much as those experts may actually have had successes on the international stage, or in others with regard to data transmission or document transmission, there's quite a lot that's already taking place here in Canada. And to one of the core principles that we spoke about earlier, as much as we want to float all the boats in the country, we absolutely have certain pockets of incredible expertise that we would like to leverage. Folks who have been very kind in sharing that expertise with us to date, that we can certainly use to benefit the country as a whole. So again, without going into necessarily detail from one province to the next, you can pick out certain provinces, for instance, such as British Columbia or Ontario, where there's quite a lot being done, not only within the province in terms of data sharing or document sharing, but also literally in the case of those two provinces, sharing of credentials and expertise basically in data sharing across provincial boundaries. And so our colleagues in Ontario and BC are certainly providing us with a great example of the way in which things could look moving forward. Alluding basically to where those expertises lie nationwide, obviously Canada, we've got a number or a couple of different interesting opportunities that we're looking to explore. You've heard blockchain basically in the news over the course of the last couple of years. But there's an interesting application of blockchain technology within the scope of credential verification or document verification. And so those consortia basically, as they start to emerge and as that technology becomes a little bit more ubiquitous within our particular industrial setting, I think there's some interesting opportunities there for data exchange that absolutely are going to make part or play a part in the eventual model that we seek to adopt. There are examples, for instance, of credential verification exchanges or document exchanges across international boundaries. And so, between, for instance, Canada and China, leveraging the expertise and infrastructure of the CHESIC network. And in fact, there's an extra player in that mechanism, which is the National Student Clearinghouse based in the United States. So document exchange really, I think here could be illustrated as potentially being between two parties, absolutely, a transmission and a receiver, a transmitter and receiver, but equally there could be multiple other parties at play for the flow of information from point A to B via C, D, or other. In terms of gaps, as much as we do have a wide range of strengths that were alluded to on the previous slide, we've also identified some gaps, and this has been particularly important for us to identify right out of the gate, because as much as we're trying to leverage, obviously, the strengths of everyone, we need to make sure that when an eventual network has actually been fleshed out and operationalized, that it does suit the needs as much of the provinces or jurisdictions that have no such data exchange capability, as much as those who currently are enjoying some of that. So, and again, not to go into any great detail for any of the provinces that are listed here, but certainly I would draw your attention to the items basically that are denoted with a number 1, where no interprovincial data exchange is apparent or none that we've been able to discern over the course of that research and or consultation. And as you go down through the legend on the right-hand side of the slide, there's other areas that could be of potential interest or gaps that we would certainly seek to close with the inception of a national network. For instance, item number 4, connection to trusted third parties other than government. So credential evaluation organizations, regulatory bodies, these all play part of the spectrum that we've identified. It's not just post-secondary institutions or even educational institutions that are in the business of exchanging student data. We too also exchange with other organizations such as regulatory bodies, orders of nurses and engineers and so forth. Medical credentialing also plays a role here. Immigration authorities, and of course, Global Affairs also offers their document verification service, similar to what's done, for instance, for the Apostille Convention signatories. There too, there's certain elements basically of what we could create that could help close some of those gaps for our learners as they seek to enter the workforce or pursue opportunities elsewhere in higher education. So again, to somewhat recap, and this is not an exhaustive list, we do have limited online credential verification capacities from what we have found. There are the options that exist right now either exist at the institutional level or are offered through third-party vendor solutions that have explicitly partnered with individual institutions. So the example here, for instance, could be the National Student Clearinghouse, where McGill has actually partnered along with them for receipt of Chinese documents through the CHESIC network. Similarly, for degree verification, Data plays a role in Canada for provision. Again, that's on a contract-by-contract basis with a variety of institutions nationwide. Parchment and Notarius are equally poised basically on an individual signatory basis to offer their particular capabilities to those who sign up for them. We don't have international connectivity to global nodes. So whatever those global nodes are, and there are a number of them in a variety of sectors. If we pick on, for instance, the Erasmus network in Europe, you know, there's really not much in the way of connectivity between, for instance, Canadian institutions and the European Erasmus network. And that's something that I think as we see more and more students participate in things like exchange terms abroad or internships or whatnot, that this is going to become of primary importance in the next few years. Equally, obviously, the list here includes things like you know, the Ontario University Application Centre capturing things like LSAT and MCAT scores. As above, really, there's a limit basically to how that's actually deployed at a national level in terms of international connectivity. We don't have member-owned provincial or even national exchange of micro-credentials or badges. And not to dwell on this necessarily, but the field is fairly rich with respect to organizations offering these types of credentials to their learners. You know, micro-credentials, for instance, and or badges are available freely to any organization that seeks to deploy them, whether it's in the context of a MOOC or something a little bit more structured and or verifiable. Co-curricular records, again, you know, we're not necessarily exchanging those in the same fashion as we would traditional transcripts, but there's an equal need basically to exchange these for our learners, specifically with workforce, but not exclusively. There are vendor options that include the Canadian Open Badge Consortium. This is not the only one. There are other badge purveyors or badge systems, online badging systems basically that exist. The question really becomes, well, how do institutions wish to move ahead, for instance, with offering these types of micro-credentials? And if there's a desire basically to offer these, how would they be represented? How would they be exchanged? How would they be displayed? There's been research, quite a lot of interesting research that we've been fortunate to read and also listen to have presented to us by not only vendors, but big players basically in the blockchain sphere. Those options basically, as much as they exist right now, I think it's probably almost at the tail end of a proof of concept phase for a few of them. It's still in its infancy, much like really the exchange of electronic exchange of educational information writ large across Canada is in its infancy. The blockchain technology piece itself is an even smaller subset of folks that are dabbling in this space, specifically for exchange of higher education credentials. So a national model, really, when we break it down, and so it's depicted on the right here of the slide. At its heart, we're looking essentially to create something that facilitates trusted connections, both something that in which we would have implicit trust in the manner in which it actually facilitates the exchange of that data, but also leverages existing trust in capacity in each of our jurisdictions. That enables data exchange between at least two parties, but maybe not necessarily exclusively two parties. That provides a connecting point for international nodes so that other organizations worldwide know, for instance, that they can come to a central Canadian network starting point and plug into that to facilitate the exchange. That is secure and is permission-based. Security obviously being of paramount importance, and really this is a good segue into Canada's diversity. Charmaine alluded to education being provincial jurisdiction, but equally so is privacy legislation. So we need to make sure that we're not only cognizant of this, but that specific diversity is factored into the notion of both consent as well as exchange of information. The national model wouldn't necessarily imply the creation of an online wallet or portal for students, though we're suggesting that that could represent a value-added service for the sharing of credentials with other third parties. For a real-life explanation or illustration of what that could look like, I would invite you to participate in the webinar that's being offered, I believe, in June by the MyEquals and Digitary group. This was a new data exchange network that was implemented in Australia and New Zealand in April 2017. The company that is actually providing this infrastructure and service is Digitary, and the platform is called MyEquals. And it's basically an online wallet through which students, regardless of which institution at which they attended in Australia or New Zealand, when they log into that wallet, they can view credentials from those Australian or New Zealand institutions, and then opt to transmit them hither and yon, wherever they wish. So, realizing that that's quite a lot to unpack, and also realizing that Charmaine has pointed you to our website, and if you haven't already had the chance to take a look at the videos that are posted on the website, I would encourage you to do so. There's a couple that are there. One which is very, very short, pithy, and amusing, and the other is a little bit lengthier, but also jam-packed with a tremendous amount of information. Perhaps we can pause here and take questions from the floor with respect to any of that or any of what we've presented so far.
So I'm also looking at the chat line. So if you prefer to send a question via chat, please do so.
I should say too, this is a precursor to the June conference, and so there's elements in the conference program that will speak to basically the Groningen project as well as notionally data exchange. In fact, when I say conference, this is going to be on the agenda for more than just the ARUCC conference. There's also the PCCAT conference where there's elements that will be discussed that are germane to the project. And I believe Kenheit as well for our CIO members. There's also members, there's discussion points there related to infrastructure.
So I can hear some people typing. So while you're typing, I'm also going to throw out a question to all of you. It's Joanne here. Was there anything that you heard today that was a new learning or a surprise vis-a-vis even the picture across Canada, or perhaps something where you felt, you know, we didn't get it quite right, that your view is X, Y, Z? because this is important to have open dialogue here. And if there's anyone who also wants to take off their mute and ask a question rather than type through the chat, that's fine as well.
Hello, this is ARUCC from Trent University. First, I'd like to commend you on the amount of work that's gone into this. It's phenomenal. Some of my questions is when you're actually approaching this project, is my understanding that you're approaching it as a public-private partnership. Is it something that ARUCC is trying to take on as a member-only platform, or is it something that you have private partnerships listed?
So I just want to mention that it was hard to hear your question. So I'm going to restate it because I think you're a bit distant from the speakerphone. So I think what we heard you ask is, in terms of the model for the governance or the partnership, will it include only member-owned, or will it be private partnerships, a combination? Did I get the question correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Is that better?
It's better when you're closer, yes, for sure.
No, nobody's ever accused me of being not loud. So,
So Charmaine, Ramesh, who would like to take that question?
Go ahead, Ramesh.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think interestingly in the steering group and in the discussions we've had with regard to what would be a good model to adopt and the business case that we would build, we had discussions almost of a chicken and egg nature. You know, are we going to focus first on the model and then determine the governance structure? Or are we going to build the governance structure and then use that to drive the model that we would implement? I think where we've landed on, no surprise, probably a bit of a Canadian approach. We'll try to do both at the same time. And fortunately for us, you know, and as Charmaine said it best, Joanne's been doing a tremendous amount of legwork for us in getting things coordinated and organized, and the business case all but wrapped up. And that's, I think, serving to a large degree to help us in what a governance layer could look like. We did struggle, for instance, with would ARUCC ever want to own something, right? Would we want to own a network? Or would this be something that would be hived off from ARUCC altogether and would have its own arm's length governance structure? And the landing point for that was essentially, that's not something we need to worry about right now at the moment. We just need to get through the creation of the business case, the posting of the call for tender, and get things basically moving at the project level before we start worrying necessarily about filling in all the details at the operational level.
We have a question from the audience on the chat. How are you going to deal with the different provincial privacy laws? And I would add to that the GDPR.
Yeah.
Do you want me to jump in? This is definitely something that we know we're going to have to pay very careful attention to. Don't know how we're going to, what the final solution will look like, except that one of our requirements is that all of the provincial privacy and the GDPR requirements will have to be met in order for institutions in the various regions to be able to connect and utilize the solution. So I don't think we know what that looks like yet, except to say that that is actually a mandatory requirement in the RFP that would be released.
There is another component in the RFP that requires that they validate that to us. And there's also a third requirement that talks about if there's a server involved, then it needs to, or an online hosted reality, then it needs to be Canadian-based conceptually and practically. So some of the solutions that are out there don't actually require that it be a server model. It could be more software that an institution adopts, or again, it depends on the one that works best, and that will come out of the RFP process. The other thing that I would add is the GDPR discussion is really critical. That is the European Union. If you Google GDPR, you will find information online, help, etc. You may, as an institution, have already heard about this. I encourage all of you to take a look at it. Essentially, if you have European data on your system, you are impacted by this GDPR. So if you have a student from Europe, for example, who filled out an application from Europe. So this is another area that we have to look closely at for the project, and it's critical.
I believe actually that GDPR legislation was due to take effect starting today.
Yeah, and they have a bit of a grace period. But you'll notice probably that you're getting asked a lot all of a sudden by companies if you have your explicit permission to continue sending you information. Some of them are even explicitly saying because of the GDPR legislation. Somebody has asked a question here. It says, I understand it is early to say, but what do you think will be the fate of current provincial web solutions for student exchange? I know you will respect provincial competencies and involve organizations such as the BCI as partners, but what do you think the fate of systems such as BCI's AEHE, our Quebec University's exchange solution, should be? Will they work in parallel for a few years? Just a clarifying point, Ramesh, is the AEHE, that intra-universitaire exchange you have for the letters of permission?
Yeah, in essence, it's the mechanism by which students within the Quebec system, higher or university system, can go on and basically take courses on letter of permission at other Quebec institutions and have those credits transferred back. So to start with, I guess, to unpack this a little bit, these systems actually do exist now. The IUT, or Inter-University Transfer System, has existed for a number of years, and the AEHE system is what's being built now to replace it. By creating a national network, we're not looking to undo any network, actually. And I don't know really that we would have the indication that any of those existing, any of that existing functionality would be replaced either at the outset or even in the medium to long term, unless the desired outcomes basically in those jurisdictions happen to change because of the inception of a national network. You know, we're looking to build on what has already been conceived and implemented in a wide range of different instances across the country. So, you know, is our goal to have any of that shift or any of those existing services change over the course of, let's say, the next couple of years? Absolutely not. We're not looking to basically throw the baby out with the bathwater. Quite the opposite. We're looking to leverage it.
I think the other reality is that there will be opportunities that'll emerge to close gaps that maybe a elegant solution is presented that complements the work that's going on as well. So we're looking for your advice and counsel regarding that. Somebody has asked the question, do you mind sharing the slides? The slides will be shared via that website that I sent you last night. We're going to keep building out that website as these sessions go along. Because these sessions are based on invitation only out to the ARUCC listserv and so on, we will just keep sharing that URL with you. And that's where you'll also find a growing list of biographies. Charmaine and Ramesh, before I go and do the messaging with regards to the next sessions, is there anything else you want to share about the project writ large that you think it's critical for our colleagues to be mindful of as you walk into these different sessions?
I think I just would encourage you to attend as many of those additional sessions as you can, I think is the key. because they give you an opportunity to see what we're talking about in action, and it allows you to create a different vision of what you may think it could be versus what is already being done. And there's some really innovative and really, really nice solutions out there. And from the student's perspective, it's amazing what is out, where the future is going, I think. So it's really to keep an open mind and to not get, at this point, too caught up in the feasibility of something, like blockchain, for example, because no one thing is likely to be the solution. We're likely going to be looking at a variety of solutions that come together to create the different options that different institutions will need.
If I can add to that, the purpose of these sessions, like the one today, for instance, is not only to help answer questions and to engage with you with regard to the work that we've been doing and the things that are coming. But this is not the only means by which we're going to disseminate information or have those conversations. Obviously, there's the face-to-face at each of our regional associations, and our national conference. But I would encourage you to also consider using the ARUCC Forum online tool. If you go to the website and click under the members area, that forum does provide the ability for, much like Reddit, I guess, although institutionally, you can post a discussion thread and folks can interact with you about that. And I think moving the agenda forward, that's going to be crucial for us, just helping people understand a little bit of the nuances behind what's being discussed, what are the new technologies that were being considered, and how things are moving. Wow, this feels exactly like PBS.
I forgot to take off my mute. Sorry about that. I was going to say, there's colleagues in your different jurisdiction, either sitting on steering or the executive or what have you, that I see are on the line as well. And they've been such a great help. And Nick, for example, Galeno in Quebec has been really a great support. We also have Rob Adamoski on the line. He and Rob Fleming have been fantastic. So, and the steering group with large, Brian and Lori and Kathy and Lisa and Jeff Adams in Manitoba. Really, we have a wonderful group of people and includes even Andrew Rita in BC. So these are resource people for you. And in addition to myself, Shar and Romesh, but I will make sure that I send out an update of the slide deck just to make sure. There's some couple of other sessions coming up, so you'll see that in front of you. We have a May 24th one. People have already signed up for that. For that session, we have Sir John Daniel, who is the former president at Laurentian. And we also have Dr. Rob Fleming, and we have Michael Ringuette from CSIC, the Canadian Information Centre for International Credentials. CSIC is Canada's Enoch Narek Centre, and they're engaging in a project internationally, as is the Groningen and the Narek Network, on digitization. So that's going to be a really important session for all of you to consider attending, or maybe send a designate. It'll help you see what the possibilities are. And we're going to run that one like a panel format. We also have on June 5th, that one you haven't registered for yet because I'm just getting the details worked out, Michael Sessa at the Post-Secondary Electronic Standards Electronic Standards Council down in the US, which CanPESC is a part of, is going to be presenting on his work internationally. And in addition, I want to honor our CanPESC colleagues, many of whom are on the call. Kathy and Lisa have been fantastic in terms of helping us access the CanPESC community, and I know that I present on it regularly there. But I want to thank the people. We will be exploring that whole PESC universe in the June 5th call to better understand the possibilities, as well as their new innovation with EdXchange, which is an enabling directory service that we need to look into. Ramesh already mentioned the June 7th session. We'll be holding other sessions. We may do a blockchain one after the conference, and we'll be getting into the business requirements. There is an organization called MREX and another one called Erasmus Without Borders that Ramesh mentioned earlier. Very interesting work on developing data exchange. So we hope to have them present as well. One solution is for the regular transcript exchange. The other solution is a fully comprehensive study abroad model where they not only do the transcript exchange, but they do the student learner agreement, the partnership agreements, etc. The only other institution I found in Canada that seems to be having a full work integrated flow for exchanges was McGill University with their course equivalency system. And then we also have Humber College, who's done some really interesting work, and I'm talking at the institutional level, with building a workflow for transcript management locally. And then, of course, we have the fantastic work of our councils of articulation and transfer, who are working very hard and have an MOU to encourage equivalency exchange. So I'd like to honor their work as well. You will be hearing from me again, and I will follow up with the materials from this particular session. Are there any last questions of Charmaine or Ramesh before we sign off? Please keep a watch out for the survey that we will send you for this session. We are planning to send a survey at the end of each session to make sure you have a confidential place to ask additional questions or raise comments. We will be asking you to be ready with lots of questions for our subsequent sessions, particularly the business requirements one. So hopefully the information we provide give you enough to get the juices flowing. Ramesh and Shar, any last words before we sign off?
Just want to say thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
She stole my thunder. Thanks, everyone.
In front of you, you will see you do see the URL for the website. We continually update it. We are also going to be making some significant changes to it over the next couple of weeks. So please keep visiting it continually to get additional updates. And there is my email. There is an E missing at the end of Stone. I'll make sure that's corrected on the slide deck. Joanne@douglascornerstone.ca, as well as the blog area that Ramesh mentioned. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we will see you at our next session.
Happy long weekend, everyone.
Yes, enjoy.